The real wealth of life on board this planet is a forwardly operative, metabolic, and intelligent regenerating system. And if we don't comprehend and realize our potential ability to support all life forever, we are cosmically bankrupt. With those powerful words, inventor and architect Buckminster Fuller challenged us to build a world that works for 100% of humanity in the shortest possible time. And he shone a light on what must become our imperative in business, technology, healthcare, and political leadership. I'd like to share the story of one of the most beautiful, sophisticated, and deep technologies that's been honed over millennia and working right this minute in each of your cells, which can help us realize this vision and help us get the next 10 years right. So, once upon a time, 1.5 billion years ago, a life-altering catalytic union came to pass. Now, up until then, Earth had been a very different place. There was no oxygen, no ozone layer, just lots of volcanic activity and thunder and lightning. And in these harsh conditions, the first forms of life to appear were two kinds of single-celled organisms called archaea and bacteria. And over time, some of the bacteria developed the capacity for photosynthesis, taking sunlight and carbon dioxide to produce food and release oxygen. And this created an oxygen revolution. And together, archaea and bacteria stabilized the Earth's atmosphere and created the conditions for new oxygen-breathing life forms to appear. As biologist Janine Benyus has so beautifully said, the purpose of life is to create conditions conducive to life and for new life. The most powerful lesson in sustainability, 3.6 billion years and counting. So back to that catalytic meeting, a particular bacterium caught the eye of a particular archaean. And this bacterium was especially alluring because it had the capacity to use oxygen to break down food and release energy, something that the archaean lacked. And the archaean was clearly smitten because before you could say evolution, it had engulfed the bacterium into its body. And scientists call this endosymbiosis, and they hail it as the ultimate merger and acquisition. The bacterium now had a safe place to live, and the archaean had a steady source of energy. I like to think of it as one of the most beautiful and enduring love stories. You see, that engulfed bacterium went on to become present-day mitochondria in all cells of plants, animals, and humans. Mitochondria, the center of energy, metabolism, and regeneration that has powered the evolution of all complex life on Earth. Now, I trained as a physician, and I'm constantly in awe of the human body. It's truly a wonderland. Whether you're awake, asleep, or dreaming, 14 quadrillion mitochondria power more than 30 trillion cells in your body, and they fuel the miracle of your everyday life experience. Everything from eating a delicious meal, to holding your loved ones, to saving the day at the office with a brilliant idea. Heart muscle cells have some of the most number of mitochondria, up to 5,000 per cell. And this allows it to beat 100,000 times every day, pumping 5.6 liters of blood 3 times per minute through your body. That's traversing a distance of 19,000 kilometers every single day. In addition to being the container for the sweetest of joys, the most profound sorrows, courage in the face of fear, and the fiercest love. Despite being the owners of such sublime beauty, we find ourselves in a peculiar predicament in life and business. In the Anthropocene, this human life has created the conditions for its own demise and that of planetary destruction. climate change, biodiversity loss, soil depletion, ocean acidification, wildfires, social injustice. Our planetary house is clearly on fire. But so is our body. And this internal personal energy crisis is not just metaphorical, it's biologically literal. And it results from a breakdown of metabolism in our mitochondria. Metabolism is just a fancy word for all the hundreds of thousands of life-sustaining chemical reactions that break down food to produce energy and to build all the proteins in our body and remove waste from it. And when metabolism breaks down, levels of cellular inflammation, that smoldering fire in our cells, goes up. Inflammation is the body's natural immune response to any kind of injury. So think about all the stressors that you inflict on your body as part of your frenzied daily lives, all the physical, mental, emotional, and environmental stressors. And just like carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere, levels of cellular inflammation in our cells is at an all-time high. Inflammation is the starting point for most of the chronic diseases that you and I worry about for ourselves, our families, and our teams. Everything from heart disease to stroke to cancer, diabetes, obesity, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, autoimmune disorders, and all manner of mental health disease such as depression and anxiety. In fact, 3 out of 4 of us at this festival and globally will suffer from one of these diseases during our lifetimes. But here's the worst part. Not only is inflammation the starting point for disease, research shows that even low levels of inflammation affect our moment-to-moment decision-making. You heard that right. Even low levels of inflammation affect our moment-to-moment decision-making. And this is because biologically, inflammation is interpreted by the body as a threat to its survival. And it makes us want to hold on and grab on to whatever resources we might have in front of us in that moment. This makes us more impulsive. We are unable to delay gratification. We resort to short-termism. And we become trapped in this kind of tunnel vision where we become really self-focused. Trust and empathy for the people around us crumbles. We don't have access to our best ideas, and we get stuck in old patterns of thinking and behaving. So think about the implications of this level of inflammation and this internal personal energy crisis for ourselves as individuals, as consumers, as businesses, and as politicians. Rampant consumerism, the desire for unmitigated growth at all costs, loss of trust in each other, in state and institutions, addictions to our technology, addictions of all kinds, social injustice. Is it really surprising then that despite having all the technology and resources at our disposal, we are not moving at the speed and scale required to meet our health or sustainability targets? As individuals and businesses, we postpone our health and well-being for the tomorrow that never comes, and we show up at work every single day with the best of intentions to have the greatest impact. But we're tired, we're depressed, we're anxious, we're lonely. We reach for the junk foods and caffeine to keep us awake during the day, and reach for alcohol and medications to lull us into some semblance of rest at night. All the while holding on to old patterns of behavior, burning ourselves out, and perpetuating the systems that are nothing but a reflection of our inner, degenerative, unsustainable selves. At work, this is reflected in skyrocketing rates of stress, burnout, and illness that account for the majority of our healthcare spend. And even though the pandemic and the Great Resignation, the Great Reset helped to shine a light on the need to address this need for well-being in the workplace, we haven't really seen a significant shift in the levels of burnout and this internal personal energy crisis at work. And this is because we have forgotten to address one of the key root causes, which is biological. And all roads point to mitochondrial health. Now, when it comes to mitochondrial health, I have good news, and I have even better news. So the good news is that we have the science. We know what works. And the even better news is that when we put that science into practice, when we adapt our lifestyles to take care of our mitochondrial health, data show that we can prevent 80 to 90% of all those diseases that I mentioned. And we can start to make wiser moment-to-moment decisions for ourselves, our businesses, and planet. And this is exactly the kind of work that I do with teams and businesses and organizations, where we take the best evidence-based strategies from lifestyle medicine, neuroscience, and behavior change, and use that to make our biology work for us and not against us. And once we start to make these changes in our lives, the connections between personal and planetary health become abundantly clear. We learn, for example, that when mitochondria break down food, the quantity and quality of the energy that they produce determines the quantity and quality of our focus, creativity, and endurance. Now, mitochondria love whole foods grown in microbiome-rich soils because from an evolutionary standpoint, that's where the energy conversion is the most efficient. So think of those foods as the clean, renewable energy for your cells, and junk and processed foods, on the other hand, that's like burning fossil fuels in your cells because they produce a lot of inflammatory byproducts. And but this production of energy is one of the least interesting things that mitochondria do, because just like outer sustainability is so much more than just fossil fuels and carbon dioxide, it's about biodiversity, it's about regeneration, it's about restoration and social justice. So too, mitochondria are much more than just energy-producing cell batteries. Think of them instead as the mastermind that balances growth versus repair in your bodies. So mitochondria help to keep all of our cells within a very narrow, safe operating zone called homeostasis. It's a narrow level of pH and temperature beyond which our cells cannot survive. And to do this, mitochondria regulate up to 2/3 of our epigenetics, the mechanism that decides which one of our genes is turned on or off at any given moment. Now, mitochondria are constantly listening to the way that we live our lives. They're constantly adjusting to the exposome, which is the collective life experiences all the way from conception till the day that we die. And mitochondria are listening. They're listening to the way that we eat, move, sleep, manage our stress, the environments that we expose ourselves to, the time that we spend in nature, how much social interaction that we have. And they take this information and respond to this stimulation by changes in DNA methylation and histone modifications on the genome. And they regulate inflammation levels up or down. In fact, this kind of epigenetic control we now know is at the center of aging and longevity. And this kind of interaction between our outer ecology and our inner ecology makes it abundantly clear that we can't separate personal from planetary health. Now, mitochondria don't work in isolation. They track the movement of the sun in the sky, and in the morning when we wake up and the sun is out, they help turn on our circadian rhythm, this beautiful symphony of gene expression that's optimized for growth. So this is the time to eat, move, and build. And then in the evening, as the sun sets, the music changes, and gene expression shifts to one that's focused on rest and repair. This is the time to sleep and to dream. Mitochondria also run some of the most efficient circular economies inside the cells. They take old damaged DNA and cell parts and convert them into new sources of energy or building blocks for the cell. This process is known as autophagy or mitophagy. They are also in control of a process called apoptosis, which is programmed cell death. So anytime old cells die, they are immediately replaced with new ones. Your bodies have an incredible capacity for regeneration. Just in this last second, 10,000 of your lymphocytes were replaced, and your gut lining renews itself every 2 to 3 days. Now, while doing all of this, mitochondria are constantly conferring and collaborating with our microbiome, the trillions of bacteria, viruses, and fungi that live on and inside our bodies, especially our gut. And the interaction and exchange of information between the gut microbiome and our mitochondria are crucial for our digestion, our immunity, regeneration, and our mental health. Together, they're responsible for the production of many hormones or neurotransmitters, including dopamine and serotonin, which determine our moods and our motivation. The more biodiversity there is in soil and the more diverse the food on our plate, the more biodiversity there is of our microbiome, the better our health. You can see clearly now that to harm the earth is to literally harm the self. So to put it all together, mitochondrial health is truly a fractal of planetary health. And we can also start to see that health is not something that happens at the doctor's office. Health is an emergent property. It emerges from the systems that we surround ourselves with. And so by taking care of our lifestyles and by starting with our mitochondrial health, we can start to show up with greater levels of focus and creativity and innovation. In 2022, the Earth for All report, which was a 30-year follow-up to the 1972 Limits to Growth report, calculated that right now we have all the resources we need to build well-being for all on a stable planet within just one generation. The investment required would be just 2 to 4% of our global income. To me, that sounds like a no-brainer, but they left us with this provocation that it remains to be seen whether we as a collective humanity will make these turnarounds a reality. It reminds me of what environmentalist James Speth famously said, that the most challenging problems when it comes to the environment are not climate change or biodiversity loss, they're human selfishness, apathy, and greed. And he called for a spiritual and cultural transformation. In the same vein, in 2022, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC report, for the first time mentioned the need for an inner transition in order to be able to meet our outer sustainability and transition goals. Clearly, we need all the solutions. We need the outer technology and AI. We need to do the inner development work. But we must not forget that in a moment of crisis, and we live in an age of polycrisis, we can't outrun our biology. Our behaviors don't rise to the level of our psychology, they fall to the level of our cellular energy. And so with all due respect to James Speth, I think beyond a cultural and spiritual transformation, we first need to have a biological and health transformation. It's the root that informs how successful all of our other efforts in business, technology, and global leadership are going to be. And yet, as human beings, we're not just simply made of cells, we're made of stories. And for too long, the story around health and sustainability has been a dismal, disempowering one. It's been unidirectional, only pointing to the downstream deleterious effects of climate change and biodiversity loss on our health. It's time to flip the narrative. It's time to take back our power quite literally and shift the paradigm in the other direction. By starting with and taking care of our mitochondrial health, by lowering inflammation and making wiser moment-to-moment decisions, we can make our personal health an asset and not a liability in the sustainability transformation. We can start to move closer to that vision that Buckminster Fuller had of building a world that works for 100% of humanity in the shortest period of time. The real wealth on board this planet is a forwardly operative, metabolic, and regenerating system. And nature is constantly moving forward to the next best iteration of the system, this next best iteration of life. More beauty, more complexity, more diversity. And since we are part of nature, it's imperative that we keep in mind that our health and the health of the planet depends on us remembering where we came from as we move to this next version of humanity. This has been beautifully captured by writer D.H. Lawrence when he wrote, "Oh, what a catastrophe for man when he cut himself off from the rhythms of the year, from the unison with the sun and the earth. Oh, what a catastrophe, what a maiming of love, when it was made personal, merely personal feeling, taken away from the rising and setting of the sun, and cut off from the magical connections with the solstice and equinox. This is what is wrong with us. We are bleeding at the roots." It's time to remember that life-altering catalytic union 1.5 billion years ago between Archean and bacterium. And listen to the clarion call, the song of our mitochondria, calling out to us to take back our power, calling back to us to fall back in love with our biology and to make this next chapter of humanity the most beautiful love story, to once again become the life that creates conditions conducive to all life. Thank you.
That was highly edifying. Thank you so much for that talk on mitochondria, which I think many of us were perhaps underappreciating, but now will not. Question for you.
Yes.
One of the things you were talking about mitochondria governing was things like in the morning, it's sunny, it makes us want to wake up and get active and move. But then in the evening, as it starts to die down and get darker, we want to rest and sleep and dream. What's going on with night owls? Why are some people more active at night if that's happening?
Yeah. So there's lots of interesting research in that area. So, you may have heard the statistic that it's like a third, like the morning risers and the folks who are sort of in the middle, and then the night owls. We're actually finding out that that's not true. So the night owls are true night owls are a minority. And most of our night owl behavior is an adaptive behavior, especially in our teens and when we're younger. So there's a genetic component to that tendency to be a true night owl, but the rest of it is just adapted behavior. So if we wanted to switch that, we can easily do that by shifting the timing of our meals, the timing of our movement, and exposure to light.
So could you turn yourself into a morning person if you aren't a self-described morning person?
You could, yes. In fact, there's very good research that's come out recently that shows that you can do that.
Really? That's fascinating. Other questions that I had was around the role of inflammation.
Yes.
And what you were talking about with both the health of the planet and how we treat the planet affecting our body made me think about so many people who, for instance, live in London. The air here is so filthy that there's a huge amount of people who've had adult onset asthma. So they didn't have asthma, they weren't asthmatic as children. They moved to London and then they get asthma. Can you go back and stop having asthma if you were to leave London or if we somehow cleaned up the air?
I think we should never, ever underestimate the ability of our biology to regenerate and to heal. But like I said, you have to create the conditions for your biology that are conducive to that kind of healing. So yes, absolutely, moving away would be a great first step, but not all of us have the luxury of doing that. So we could at least try to, use some filters at home if that's available, the HEPA, the air filters. But absolutely, if we were to take ourselves away from that environment, or if that's not possible, because not all of us can just pick up and leave, the other place that you can sort of target for those kinds of sensitivities is your microbiome. So if you strengthen your gut microbiome, which again, because of the diets that we eat and the stresses that we expose ourselves to, when that gut microbiome breaks down and we lose the biodiversity, it increases our predisposition to allergies, including asthma. So that's another step that you can take in addition to moving away from London.
So would you, if you can't move away from London, try probiotics.
From food.
Fermentation.
Yeah, fermented foods, fiber-rich whole foods. Yeah,
Right.
The jury on probiotic supplements is a bit iffy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, this is a post-lunch audience, so I think we're all going to digest that information along with your fantastic talk. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks very much.